Hey class, welcome to Skrib's Newsweek number 2. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. Hopefully you had a great weekend. I just wanted to go through some relevant sort of news topics that are going on across the world and within the United States as well, that I feel are pretty important for us to kind of talk about. Since we are coming up in the sort of election cycle, we're going to be discussing a bit of Trump, the upcoming elections in general. We're going to be doing some documentary discussions on the social dilemma, and later on some discussions on what is happening internationally. And so I don't know if you've been following along or not, but Trump recently, right, famously got COVID-19. And so interestingly, ironically, and hilariously enough, after the presidential debate, which was a catastrophe. Every single news outlet essentially said it was a catastrophe. But after that, essentially, Trump got COVID-19. Joe Biden did not, especially after he kept making fun of Biden on stage, saying he wears a mask that's 200 feet big and he stays away from everyone, yada, yada, right? And so he was, of course, airlifted to a hospital where he literally got the presidential treatment. And so he, as of today, I believe, he is, quote unquote, feeling better. They were giving him some oxygen, some steroid cycles, but he's been getting some flack because he wanted to leave the hospital early to, in this photograph right here, kind of wave to his supporters and fans in order to, show or probably, demonstrate some type of strength, right? Saying, oh, I'm here. I'm not feeling bad. And honestly, I think this can go either way for the presidency, because he could either spin this and say, hey, COVID wasn't that bad. I got over it. And so maybe the 200 plus thousand deaths was because of some other unrelated incidents, or they had pre-existing conditions, whatever he wants to spin it as. Or it is going to affect him negatively. I think I saw some recent polls, I think after the first debate, and his poll numbers actually went down quite a bit. I believe in that poll, Arizona, which is famously a red state, was actually considering maybe swinging for Biden. So this election is going to be very interesting and literally a historic one. But earlier today, Trump returned to the White House and in front of all of the news cameras, very conscientiously, was removing his mask. Despite, of course, having COVID. But the interesting thing that I saw here was, as he sort of walked up the stairs and started to, remove his mask, he, if you notice in the video, and, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I swear to God, he just seemed out of breath. And so I think he was doing this more for the PR show and the election than anything else. Because if you kind of, I don't know if I can zoom in on this, but he seems a little bit sort of out of breath to me. Let me try to get this out of the way. He's just kind of like breathing a little like, heavily or intently. And so I think he's trying to exude some strength, right, in the weeks before the election, or even the election started now with some mail-in ballots. But he definitely is sort of, I think, probably sweating a little bit. Doesn't know how the election is going to be, swaying, but we are living in historic times here. So, hopefully, regardless of political affiliation, hopefully he recovers soon. But speaking of elections, I don't know if any of you watch John Oliver. I love some of his twists and some of his information. He recently did an excellent sort of segment on elections and election ballots. And so especially this year, because we are in a very unprecedented COVID situation and a pandemic situation, the election and balloting system has come into question. So Trump and the Republicans have, over the last few months, consistently said that the mail-in system is fraudulent. There's going to be, a terrible election. We can't trust it, etc. And that kind of rhetoric, honestly, just destabilizes the, foundational democratic principles that the country is founded on, right? And so I think that is very dangerous language for him to use, and it's not true. Even if there is a infinitesimally small amount of mismanagement, because human beings are human beings, I don't believe it's ever going to sway the election one way or another. But what John Oliver states here, which is very interesting to hear, he was talking about something called the blue shift, which I found interesting towards the middle to later segment. Essentially saying that because of the rhetoric in the last few months, the Republicans in the red camp have essentially, I guess, pulled a little bit more towards voting in person. And so let's say traditionally when we've had election night and we're all watching the news, and says that this person is going to be the new president of the United States, the Republicans are going to have a majority lead with whoever they vote for, on election night. And the blue shift is in response to they were polling most of whoever is going to probably vote Democrat or for Biden, and because they're doing more mail-in voting, the mail-in voting takes some time, especially right now because the USPS has suffered and got budget cuts. People are obviously in the middle of a pandemic, so our counting of the ballots and these are like tens and tens of thousands of ballots, very time consuming. It's going to be slowed down on top of that, and so the counting and the voting has already started now, and is going to continue until the mid to end November. And so John Oliver essentially was stating that blue shift, saying that whatever the results are going to be the night of, there potentially might be a blue shift moving forward, right, as ballots are kind of coming in. But I would imagine that if Trump does, let's say on the night of, get even a small lead, an edge, and he quote unquote wins the election from those popular vote numbers, he's automatically, even if like a few days or a week or two goes by and all the mail-in ballots are coming in, let's say if Biden theoretically gets more votes, I'm sure Trump is going to say this fraudulent. The Democrats are trying to cheat their way in, etc. Regardless of what the situation might be, which I don't believe that is true, I just don't like any language that kind of erodes the faith in the sort of electoral system that we have and our democracy in general. I think that's very, very dangerous language. But speaking of sort of the electoral system and our politics and just society in general, my cousin recommended this a few days ago. We were hanging out, Friday night for my birthday, and so she recommended I watch The Social Dilemma, and it's on Netflix right now. It's a great documentary, and in it they essentially have 5 or 6 IT sort of engineers, software engineers, who write all of the programming for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, right? All of these type of companies, and essentially saying how they make it as addictive as humanly possible, so that you spend more and more time on your phone, and so that they can target ads for you, so they can make more money and revenue. But that's all well and good, right? But what kind of struck me on top of that was they had some sociologists and psychologists and political analysts on there as well. And so they've mapped out this sort of recent trend of, the U.S. politics being so polarized and so skewed. And sort of they did analyses over the last couple of decades. And sort of the trend line was kind of going steady, 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 and then kind of like shot up in a negative way. And it was around the 2009, 2010 era, whenever the social media platforms really started to blow up. And so the reason for this is because, from what they say, a lot of the information that we get on our phones and our apps and everything else, it's being geared to give you what you want to hear so that you're on the application or on your phone the longest. And so let's say even in the same household, if I type in global warming is, and my mom or dad types in global warming is, I might get something completely different from them, right? Because it's very isolated and specific towards you. And so they were commenting on this and saying, because the artificial intelligence has essentially geared your experience to whatever you want it to be, people have naturally gravitated towards their camps, or i.e. not listening to each other, not communicating or talking to each other, because whatever they're searching up is, part of their narrative. And so a lot of times in recent years, let's say if you're watching, I don't know, like Vice News or CNN News or whoever, there's some journalists on the streets, and they're asking like, oh, do you believe what do you think of Republicans or Democrats or vice versa? They'll usually say something like, oh, I think they're idiots. They're destroying the country. They're doing X, Y, and Z. I don't know how they're possibly thinking this way. The reason for that is because each camp is reading a lot of material and believing that they're well informed, but they're not getting the other perspective or vice versa. And so they're literally just getting information that is perfectly geared towards whatever they already think. And so it's all of the engineers here in the documentary were so frightened, right? Because this is the way that the companies are using it now. And we actually see real-time degradation in our social fabric and politics because of it. And so they've recommended Congress, and I know I'm giving like an entire synopsis of the documentary, I apologize, but it's really interesting for me. So they're recommending essentially that Congress and the government step in, right? And, have some protection laws for the citizens. So I highly recommend you watch this. It's not going to be part of homework, but this is just super interesting. And then like last piece of news. I don't know if any of you have been hearing about this, but Armenia and Azerbaijan are now at war, essentially, and conflict. Azerbaijan started to fire at Armenia, or not technically Armenia, I suppose. But I'll get into that in a second. So, we've been having protesters, Armenian protesters out on the streets, kind of on the tail end of all of the Black Lives Matter movements that we had over the summer. Now the Armenians are protesting because they want peace. They don't want Azerbaijan or Turkey or anyone else to transgress against their territory. And the reason being, I think there's another map here. Oh, I thought I had a map. My apologies. I think it's here. Yes. The reason being is this is Armenia and Azerbaijan right here. And so this disputed territory in the red called Nagorno-Karabakh, it's technically a independent republic on its own, but it's ethnically almost 100% Armenian. And so Armenia has, over the last 30 years or so, considered it part of their territory. Even though, 30 years, I think 94, they stopped fighting. And so both sides had a ceasefire. They kind of had independence, but it was a very temporary truce. And so now they're resuming fights over this territory and land. So obviously, all of my Armenian brothers and sisters are protesting out on the streets, especially because the media, CNN, Fox, all the big ones here, are not really covering the conflict at all or fairly. So they want actual, representation. And because they were not covering the conflict, even in Los Angeles, this was, the 4th? So this was yesterday. Armenians were stopping the 101 freeway. They literally blocked the freeway, right, in protest and saying, hey, no one's, the news is not doing anything. And so, we need to kind of spread the awareness. And so protesting, trying to get the word out. All my social media has been blowing up in recent days. And so, maybe you've seen something as well. And of course, the Armenian flags flying on some of the cars. But yesterday I was on a Zoom call with my a couple of my old professors from Cal State LA and UCLA. Very well-regarded historians. And so we were kind of talking about this, and I brought forth a possible strategy. I don't know if it'll work or not, but because this is sort of disputed territory, I said, how about they do what Russia did with Crimea? Have them do an emergency referendum and vote what side they want to be on. So at least they could, let's say, officially say we're part of Armenia, right? Or Azerbaijan or vice versa, however they're going to vote. I'm guessing they would vote pro-Armenia. Most of them are ethnically Armenian now. And then after that, they can probably get backed up by maybe Russia at a certain point, because Russia is probably the only one that could end the conflict because they're the only power nearby that could save Armenia. We have Turkey on the left-hand side, Azerbaijan over here, both sort of Turkish Muslim countries, Armenia kind of being sandwiched in the middle, very landlocked. So Russia's the closest ally that they have. But we'll see how it goes down. Hopefully peace can come sooner rather than later. But yeah, definitely this is like sort of local Los Angeles news because we have such a large Armenian population. I'm half Armenian myself. And hopefully you've been seeing something else in the news as well. But just to kind of end the discussion here, I just want to kind of point out and say, I'm proud of everyone so far. You've been doing great work. And so hopefully these news weeks are a little bit of a nice little break for all of you. I hope the semester is going well. I'll definitely try to have more of these news weeks moving forward, especially we have so much this semester to cover. As far as elections go, obviously news for Armenia and other important kind of aspects and topics. But yeah, just wanted to wish everyone well. And then, hopefully everything is going great in your life. And I will see you for the next news week. Hopefully that'll be in a week or two, but we'll see. So hopefully see you on the news week for number 3. Take care, folks. Have a good night.